Hello and welcome to my review of The Exorcist III, what I consider to be personally one of the most underrated horror sequels of all time. It was written and directed by William Peter Blatty, the author of the original novel and screenwriter and producer of the first movie, and based on his own sequel novel, sort of, Legion. It stars George C. Scott as Lieutenant William Kinderman, who was the homicide detective who popped up here and there in the first movie, played by the late Lee J. Cobb. And it also stars a mostly television actor named Ed Flanders, who's reprising the role of Father Dyer from the original movie, who was played by William O'Malley in the original, who was an actual priest who worked at Georgetown University. Does say the plot, and then there's a special role played by two actors. I'll get to that later, just to avoid spoilers for now. The basic plot goes that Kinderman is investigating a series of ritualistic murders that resemble those committed by the Gemini killer, who was caught and executed 15 years prior, right around the time of the exorcism of Regan McNeil. Now, and eventually, and the way the story goes, that it eventually leads him to the psych ward of a hospital and its various residents. That's the short version of the story. But one thing I'd like to point out is that you never see the bodies of the murder victims, but you hear them talk about it, and that's just as scary. It's scary because, and the reason why I like it is because it allows you to use your imagination and fill in the blanks and create this horrifying picture in your head. And in fact, here's an example coming up right now.
Thomas Kintry, black boy about 12 years old. Killer drove an ingot into each of his eyes and cut off his head. In place of his head was the head from a statue of Christ, all done up in blackface, like a minstrel show, you know. The eyes and the mouth painted white. Mr. Bowman's boy had been crucified on a pair of rolling oars.
Now, Kinderman's investigations eventually lead into these murders, eventually lead him to the psych ward of a local hospital. And in the disturbed area of the psychiatric ward, which is basically the patients who are kept locked up because of their violent tendencies, meets a character who is named only Patient X. And he is played by none other than Jason Miller, who played Damien Karras in the original movie. And Kinderman recognizes him as such. But there is something else inside of him. And this is kind of a spoiler, so just beware. There's a real Gemini killer who is portrayed by Brad Dourif. And because of this, Jason Miller himself doesn't get much to do, but he is good in this. Now, this may require a little bit of explanation. What happens is that whenever the Gemini killer begins to speak strongly, the audience is allowed to see him as Brad Dourif, who's playing James Veneman, the Gemini killer. Now, Kinderman doesn't see this. He just sees the face of Jason Miller, i.e. the face of Father Damien Karras instead. But the audience gets to see the Gemini killer. They get to see Brad Dourif playing him. And he is fantastic. His monologues about punishing and the things he does to his victims, they're so chilling. They also fall under the same category of just the descriptions allowing you to fill in the creepy stuff in your head. Now, I tried to get footage of this, but it was a little too quiet. The scene was a little too quiet, and my capture software couldn't really get it properly. So you'll just have to see the movie to see that. Now, one question, but the best thing about this is that he really does convince you that he is the Gemini killer. That if he is, and he's locked up in this cell in the straitjacket, how does he get out? And why is he in the body of Damien Karras? Well, if you want those answers, you'll just have to watch the movie. Okay, now I'm going to move on to the flaws of this movie, and in order to do that, I'm just going to introduce this by showing just a little bit of the movie that was a little bit irritating to me, and it is a flaw. I don't let it ruin the movie, but it is a flaw, and it should be pointed out. EKG stat to ER. EKG stat to ER. You just missed a vital clue, Mr. Great Detective. Hooray! Now, moving on to a more serious flaw in the movie. Something that this film is kind of notorious for is that Morgan Creek Studios, the production company, they forced William Peter Blatty to film a different ending than the one he wanted. They forced him to include an exorcism in the movie because they thought that something to do with marketing, I guess, and then they made him call it Exorcist III. And I will have to agree, this is a flaw in the movie. I don't consider it a movie-breaking flaw, but it is really over the top compared to what went before. Although I do like certain things about this exorcism scene, like the fact that it's implying that that whatever is going on, it's like that the stuff that's going on isn't really there. It's just being shown to the person present in their mind. And the guy who plays the exorcist guy in this, Father Morning, he's played by Nicol Williamson, who is an actor that I love, based off his performance as Merlin in Excalibur. And considering that he's in the movie for only a couple of scenes before this, and he doesn't really have much in the way of dialogue, he pulls it off fantastically. Yeah, the only problem with this is that this doesn't really quite match the movie that came before it. I think it works fine. Yeah, it is a little overblown and doesn't quite fit, but I find that it works okay if you're not like really nitpicky. I'm not entirely sure what the original ending would have entailed, because in the ending is fairly anticlimactic. Basically, I found it to be very anticlimactic, and basically the Gemini killer just kind of wills the body to die. So I think hopefully whatever Blatty intended for the movie was a happy medium between exorcism and anticlimax, because let's face it, the ending of the book is not very cinematic. In spite of these flaws, The Exorcist III has many strong points in its favor. It has great cinematography, great acting, great dialogue between the characters. I mean, this has some of the funniest dialogue you'll ever find in a horror film. I mean, it's genuinely amusing and entertaining. And like I said, beautiful cinematography, can't say that enough. And it has some really, truly effective scares and creepy moments. I mean, I won't spoil any of them for anyone who hasn't seen it, but trust me, they're well worth it. Now, before I go, I'd like to comment on this movie's status as an underrated movie. I feel like this is underrated largely because a lot of people haven't seen it. And I guess that would be because, after Exorcist 2 came out, everyone kind of lost faith in the franchise, which I can kind of understand. But one thing about this that really bugs me, and it proves that sometimes awards people are just full of shit, is the fact that George C. Scott was awarded a Golden Raspberry for his performance as Kinderman. A Razzie. He got a Razzie for his performance, and he plays it pitch perfectly. Where were the Razzies giving him awards when he was god-awful in Firestarter? Where were they then? Man, 1990 must have been a pretty slow year. Oh, wait, never mind. Forget what I just said there. There was a much shittier, perfectly fine for mocking sequel that came out that year. And a threequel, too. Damn it, Razzies. You let me down. You're sitting down on the job that year. My rating for The Exorcist 3 is 4.5 stars out of 5. It's not perfect, but if you don't mind seeing something a little bit different than the original, it's well worth a watch. It's got some great performances and great all-around everything with a few flaws, but aside from that, it's a really good movie. Okay, guys, that's the end of the review. Until next time, bye.